My family turned their backs on me when I was broke and struggling. 5 years later, they suddenly showed up at my door and told me, "You don't have a family anymore. We're taking the house." I didn't argue or waste a single word. Instead, I quietly pulled out my phone and dialed 911, leaving them in total shock. Can you imagine looking your own father in the eye after 5 years of silent abandonment, only to hear him declare, "You don't even have a family. We will take this house." Because that's exactly what happened to me. They didn't just walk in like they owned the place, they believed they did. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Honestly, from the outside, we looked like the quintessential American family in suburban Pennsylvania. My dad, Richard, was your classic bank manager, always in a crisp suit, briefcase glued to his hand. My mom, Diane, a dedicated nurse, kept our modest 3-bedroom house spotless. And then there was Brian, my older brother, the golden child. 3 years older than me and seemingly destined for greatness in my parents' eyes. But scratch beneath that perfect surface, and you'd find a really complicated dynamic that basically shaped my entire life. Even as a kid, I could feel the invisible line drawn between Brian and me. His mediocre grades, celebrated, my excellent ones, just expected. When he got into state university on a partial scholarship, my parents threw a huge party, bought him a brand new car, and practically drained their savings to cover the rest of his tuition. They wanted to make sure their investment was secure. Me? From my freshman year of high school, the message was loud and clear. I'd be working part-time jobs to save for college. So by 16, I was juggling school with 20 hours a week. At the local diner, flipping pancakes and slinging burgers, just trying to squirrel away every single penny. It didn't matter that I had straight A's and was involved in everything. There was never any talk of me going to a prestigious university. Brian was the priority, the main event. I was just the afterthought. But there was one person, just one, who truly saw me, my Grandma Margaret. She was my mom's mother, and she lived about an hour away in this enchanting little cottage, surrounded by a garden that, to a child, felt absolutely magical. Every summer, while Brian was off at some expensive sports camp my parents funded, I'd spend 3 glorious weeks with her. Those weeks were my salvation. "Sabrina," she'd tell me, her hands, weathered from decades of gardening and hard work, gently guiding mine as we planted tomatoes. "Never let anyone tell you what your worth is. Only you decide that." And she'd always add, "And never depend on someone else to keep a roof over your head. Learn to build your own." Grandma Margaret had basically raised 3 kids on her own after my grandfather passed away when my mom was only 12. She worked tirelessly as a seamstress, making sure all her children got at least some college education. Her strength, her fierce independence, it became my North Star, especially when things at home felt suffocating. As college loomed, the pressure from my parents became unbearable. My mom had it all planned out. I was going to be a nurse, just like her. "It's a stable profession, Sabrina. You'll always have work," she'd insist, completely ignoring my utter lack of interest in anything medical. My dad, of course, chimed in, "Creative careers are for people who have family money to fall back on." They just didn't get it. They didn't see that I'd found my passion in graphic design during junior year. My art teacher, Ms. Winters, had a real eye for talent, and she'd introduced me to digital design programs. I took to it like a fish to water, staying late after school, entering competitions. When I actually won a regional design award, my parents just waved it off as a nice hobby, certainly not a real career path. The tension hit its absolute peak my senior year, right when college applications were due. I applied to our local community college, which had a surprisingly strong design program, and a few affordable state schools with arts programs. But when the acceptance letters started rolling in, my parents dug in their heels. They flat out refused to contribute a single dime to my education unless I switched my major to nursing or business. "We are not wasting money on an art degree," my father declared, his voice firm and final at dinner one night. "If you want to throw away your future, you can pay for it yourself." I remember looking at my mom, desperate for just a flicker of support, but she just stared at her plate. And Brian, home from college, just smirked from across the table. "Maybe you should listen to Dad, Sabrina," he sneered. "Not everyone is cut out for a real career." That night, I cried myself to sleep. The tears just wouldn't stop. But the next morning, something hardened inside me. A decision was made. I would go to community college, work full-time, and I would get my design degree. No matter what. When I announced it at breakfast, my father just gave a dismissive shrug. "Your life, your mistake," he said. And that was that. So I graduated high school with honors, moved into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, and dove headfirst into community college. I was working nearly 40 hours a week, coffee shop in the mornings, retail at the mall in the evenings, all while somehow maintaining a 3.8 GPA in my design classes. It was brutal, but I was doing it. And every chance I got, I visited Grandma Margaret, soaking up her unwavering belief in me. That woman was my rock. After 2 years, I transferred to a state university to finish my bachelor's in graphic design. By then, my parents and I were barely speaking. Our interactions were just these tense, obligatory holiday visits. My dad would pepper me with pointed questions about my income potential, and my mom would furtively slip me $20 bills like I was still a child, whispering, "In case you need to eat." Meanwhile, Brian had graduated, landed a job at a financial firm, just like Dad, and every family gathering became his personal showcase. "Brian just got a promotion," Mom would beam, "and he's looking at buying a condo downtown." The unspoken comparison, the subtle jab at my perceived failure, hung in the air, thick and heavy. By the time I graduated with my bachelor's, I was 22 and hadn't lived at home in 4 years. My parents? They skipped my graduation entirely, choosing to attend some conference related to Brian's work instead. The only family member there, sitting proudly in the audience with her walker, was Grandma Margaret. Her beaming smile as I walked across that stage meant more to me than 1,000 absent relatives ever could. With my degree finally in hand, I decided to make a fresh start in Philadelphia. The design scene was booming, and I'd landed an internship that looked promising. The night before I left, I had dinner with Grandma Margaret on her porch. "I'm scared," I admitted as we shared a slice of pie. "What if they're right? What if I fail?" She took my hand, her blue eyes sharp and clear despite her 82 years, meeting mine. "Sabrina, the only true failure is living someone else's dream. You follow your heart, and I'll always be here if you need a soft place to land." Those words echoed in my mind as I packed my car the next morning, driving straight toward my future, absolutely determined to prove that I could succeed on my own terms, even if my family refused to believe in me. My first couple of years in Philly were tough, no lie, but also incredibly rewarding. I moved from my internship to a junior designer at a small marketing agency. The pay was modest, yeah, but I was building my portfolio, making connections, finally feeling like I was on my path. I shared a 2-bedroom apartment in a slightly rougher neighborhood with Jessica, a teacher I'd found through a roommate app. We clicked instantly, turning that little apartment into a cozy thrift store chic home. I called Grandma Margaret every week, visited whenever I could. My contact with my parents? It had dwindled to those awkward, obligatory birthday calls and tense Thanksgiving visits. Brian, of course, had been promoted again and bought that downtown condo. My mom never, ever failed to mention it. Then, 5 years ago, my world just imploded. The recession hit our industry like a tidal wave. My marketing agency lost several major clients, boom, 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 in a couple of months. One Monday morning, we all showed up to find the doors locked, a bankruptcy notice taped to the window. Just like that, I was unemployed. I immediately started freelancing, reached out to old clients, applied for anything and everything, but everyone was slashing budgets, and freelance designers were the first to go. My savings, which were already pretty meager, just evaporated as I tried to keep up with rent and groceries. Jessica, bless her heart, helped where she could, covering utilities, sharing her teacher's lounge leftovers, but she wasn't exactly rolling in cash either. After 3 agonizing months of sparse work and bills piling up, I got an eviction warning. I'd managed to pay partial rent for 2 months, but the landlord's patience had run out. Jessica was moving in with her boyfriend next month, and I had absolutely no way to cover the full rent on my own. That's when the real panic set in. I was weeks away from homelessness. With absolutely nowhere else to turn, I did the unthinkable. I swallowed every ounce of my pride and called my parents. The phone rang 4 times, an eternity, before my mother answered with this distracted, almost annoyed, "Hello?" "Mom, it's Sabrina," I managed, my voice already trembling, shaking. "I need help." There was this pregnant pause, and I could hear her calling out to my father. "Richard, it's Sabrina." I explained everything, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible, just asking if I could borrow enough for 1 month's rent while I found steady work. I promised, swore, to pay them back with interest. The silence that followed my request stretched and stretched until it felt physically painful. Then, my father's voice came on the line, cold, distant, like he was speaking from another planet. "Sabrina, this is exactly what we warned you about. This unstable career path you chose? It has led you exactly where we predicted." "Dad, please," I whispered, tears just streaming down my face, blurring my vision. "I just need a little help to get back on my feet. I have interviews lined up, but I need somewhere to live." My mother chimed in, almost rehearsed. "We've been supporting Brian with his MBA tuition. We simply don't have extra funds right now." I knew, deep down, it was a lie. A blatant, hurtful lie. They always had money for Brian. What they meant was, they didn't have money for me. "You made your bed when you ignored our advice," my father continued, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Perhaps this will teach you to make more practical decisions in the future." The call ended. No offer of help, not even a temporary place to stay. Nothing. I just sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes, sobbing until I literally couldn't breathe. That night, I tried calling Grandma Margaret but got no answer. The next day, her neighbor called to tell me she'd been hospitalized with pneumonia. My heart shattered. I wanted so desperately to be with her, but I had no money for the trip, nowhere to leave my last few belongings. 2 weeks later, the eviction was official. Jessica, my amazing roommate, helped me pack my most essential things into my beat-up 12-year-old Honda Civic. My design equipment, clothes, a few personal items, that's all that fit. The rest went into a tiny storage unit I paid for, with my last $100. With truly nowhere else to go, I drove to my parents' house. It was a cold, rainy October evening when I pulled into their driveway. Through the living room window, I could see them, watching TV, completely oblivious. I sat in my car for 20 excruciating minutes, just trying to gather an ounce of courage. Finally, I got out, walked to the door, and rang the bell. My father answered, his expression shifting from surprise to immediate disapproval as he took in my disheveled appearance, the raw desperation in my eyes. "Sabrina, what are you doing here?" "Dad, I lost my apartment. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks until I can find work and save up. Please." He looked past me, to my car crammed full of my life, and frowned. This is exactly what happens with these artistic careers. Instability. "Richard, who is it?" My mom appeared behind him, her face hardening the moment she saw me. "Our daughter seems to have found herself homeless," he replied, not even attempting to hide his disdain. "I'm not homeless," I choked out, my voice breaking. I need family right now." My father crossed his arms, his posture rigid. "You chose your path, Sabrina. You chose to ignore our guidance. Now you need to take responsibility for those choices." My mother added, almost an afterthought, "We're hosting the neighborhood association meeting tomorrow. This really isn't a good time." I stood there, rain soaking through my jacket, watching them. "You've made it clear you don't need our input in your life decisions," my father stated, his voice firm, unwavering. "You cannot reject our advice, and then expect our support when those decisions lead to hardship." And with that, he closed the door. He just closed the door. On me. His own daughter. I stayed on that porch for what felt like an eternity, the rain chilling me to the bone. Then I trudged back to my car. I sat in their driveway, watching their shadows move behind the curtains, waiting. Praying they'd change their minds, come out, offer something. They never did. Eventually, I drove to a Walmart parking lot. That's where I spent the night, curled up in my reclined driver's seat. $25 to my name, and absolutely nowhere to go. I called and texted Brian, just hoping my brother might offer some help. My messages went unanswered. For 2 weeks, I lived in my car. I'd shower at a gym I still had a membership to, use library computers to hunt for jobs and apartments. I kept calling my parents, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. They were never returned. One night, I drove past their house and saw Brian's car. The entire family was together, without me. It was the lowest point of my entire life. Felt utterly abandoned, without a home, without a family to turn to. The very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had completely shut me out when I needed them most. All because I dared to follow my own path instead of the one they'd chosen for me. One particularly brutal November morning, I was holed up in a corner of a local coffee shop, nursing a single cup of tea. It was my pathetic justification for using their free Wi-Fi. I'd been there for hours, just frantically searching for design, gigs for any affordable housing. Weeks of living in my car had taken their toll. My clothes were a wrinkled mess stored in garbage bags, and despite my best efforts with gym showers, I looked visibly disheveled. I was so consumed by my laptop, so lost in my own desperation, that I didn't even notice someone approaching until they spoke. Sabrina? Sabrina Wilson? I looked up. It was Eleanor Garcia, a former colleague from the marketing agency. She was dressed in this smart pea coat, holding a fancy to-go coffee, looking exactly like the successful professional I felt I'd utterly failed to become. "Eleanor, hi," I stammered, instantly self-conscious about everything. "I thought that was you. I've been trying to reach you," she said, sliding into the chair across from me, either not noticing or politely ignoring my unkempt state. "How have you been? Working somewhere new?" I considered lying, trying to keep up some pathetic facade of success, but I was just too exhausted for pretense. "Not exactly. I've been freelancing, but it's been really slow. Actually, I'm kind of between places right now." Eleanor's expression, which had been so casually friendly, shifted. Concern etched itself onto her face. "Between places? As in, housing?" I just nodded, fighting back tears of pure embarrassment. "Yeah, it's been a rough few months." Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Sabrina, are you living in your car?" That direct question. It shattered the last bit of composure I had left. I just nodded again, unable to speak, as hot tears spilled down my cheeks. Eleanor immediately moved her chair closer, putting a hand on my arm. "Why didn't you reach out to any of us?" "The whole team's been checking in with each other since the agency closed. I didn't want anyone to know how badly I was failing," I admitted. Everyone else seemed to land on their feet. Eleanor shook her head, a deep sigh escaping her. "Trust me, Sabrina, everyone struggled. I was unemployed for 6 weeks before I found something." She paused, really studying my face. "When was the last time you ate a proper meal?" The question hit me. I honestly couldn't remember. I'd been surviving on granola bars and dollar menu items when I could afford them. "Come on," Eleanor said, standing up. "Pack your stuff. You're coming with me." Before I could even protest, she was helping me gather my laptop and bag. She led me to her car, insisting I leave mine in the coffee shop parking lot temporarily. 30 minutes later, we were in her warm, cozy apartment, and she was making me sandwiches and soup. After I'd eaten, she led me to her spare bedroom. "It's not much, but it's got a real bed and it's yours for as long as you need it," she said, putting fresh towels on the dresser. I was completely overwhelmed by her kindness. "Eleanor, I can't accept this. We were just coworkers." "We were a team," she corrected me gently. "And now we're friends. That's what friends do." She sat on the edge of the bed. "Besides, I might even have a job opportunity for you." Eleanor explained that her boyfriend, Michael, ran a small design studio specializing in web development. They needed someone to help with graphic elements and user interface design. The pay was modest, she cautioned, but it was steady work. "I can't promise anything," she said, "but I'll talk to him tonight. In the meantime, take a hot shower." Get some real sleep and we'll figure this out together. That night, for the first time in months, I felt hope. The very next morning, I went with Eleanor to meet Michael. His studio was small, cozy even, but clearly growing. He looked at my portfolio, asked a few questions, and then, on the spot, he offered me a position. It was entry-level, a step back. Sure, but it was work. It was a regular paycheck. I accepted immediately. That afternoon, Eleanor helped me retrieve my car and the few possessions I'd been living out of. As we were organizing the spare room, my phone rang. An unrecognized number. "Is this Sabrina Wilson?" An unfamiliar voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "This is Nancy Holden, your grandmother's neighbor. I've been trying to reach you. Your grandmother's condition has worsened. The doctors aren't optimistic." My heart absolutely sank. In the chaos of my own crisis, I hadn't been able to check on Grandma Margaret as often as I should have. We'd kept missing each other's calls. "She's been asking for you," Nancy continued. "I think you should come if you can." I explained the situation to Eleanor, who, without a second thought, immediately offered to drive me the 3 hours to my grandmother's town. "We'll go right now," she insisted. "Just let me call Michael to reschedule tomorrow's meeting." We arrived at the hospital just after 9 that evening. Grandma Margaret looked so incredibly small in that hospital bed, hooked up to oxygen and monitors. But her eyes. They lit up when she saw me, and she reached out a frail hand. "My Sabrina," she whispered. "I knew you would come." I sat with her all night, holding her hand, talking about my new job opportunity. I didn't burden her with the agonizing details of my homelessness or my parents' cruel rejection. She was too weak for such upsetting news. Instead, I focused on the positive. Turn my life had taken all thanks to Eleanor. "Always told you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You make your own way." In the early morning hours, she asked me to retrieve a small box from her purse, which Nancy had brought. Inside was a key and a folded document. "My will," she explained softly. "The house is yours, always meant for you." I tried to object, to tell her she'd recover, she'd go home, but she just shook her head. "Listen now," she said, her voice surprisingly firm despite her weakness. "You have the spirit, the strength. Brian has your parents. You need roots." 2 days later, Grandma Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, her hand still in mine. My grief was immense. Amidst it, I had to navigate the practical matters of her passing. The hospital contacted my parents, who arrived for the funeral arrangements, looking appropriately somber, but honestly, largely uninvolved. Their demeanor changed dramatically, though, during the reading of the will. Grandma Margaret had, indeed, left her cottage and her entire savings to me, with only small mementos going to my mother and Brian. My father's face darkened with anger. My mother burst into tears. "Mother always favored you," she accused me after the lawyer left. I just held my tongue. Instead, I collected the keys to my grandmother's house and started the process of moving into my unexpected inheritance. The cottage needed work, for sure. It had been well maintained, but it definitely reflected my grandmother's 85 years in its decor and appliances. Still, it was mine. A home no one could ever take from me. Eleanor helped me move in, bringing necessities, spending a whole weekend helping me clean. "It has good bones," she declared as we scrubbed the kitchen, "and amazing natural light for a home office." For the first time in months, I fell asleep feeling truly safe, filled with a renewed sense of possibility. Standing in Grandma Margaret's garden, now overgrown but still undeniably beautiful, I could almost hear her voice, clear as day. "You build your own shelter, Sabrina. You always could." With a roof securely over my head and a steady job, could do remotely, I finally began the painstaking process of rebuilding my life. I transformed the small front room of the cottage into my home office, investing in a new desk and the design equipment I desperately needed. Michael was thrilled with my work, and gradually, my responsibilities and pay increased. The cottage itself became my passion project. I tackled one room at a time, meticulously maintaining the charming character Grandma Margaret had loved. The garden, her absolute pride and joy, became my weekend therapy. I knew nothing about plants when I started, but I bought books, watched videos, and slowly, painstakingly, brought those overgrown beds back to vibrant life. Living in a small town after years in the city took some adjusting. At first, I kept to myself, still raw from my family's rejection, wary of forming new connections. But small towns, they have a way of drawing you in, whether you want them to or not. It started with Mrs. Jenkins next door, who brought over a comforting casserole to welcome the new neighbor, even though she'd known me as Margaret's granddaughter for years. Then came Tom from the hardware store, who started setting aside vintage doorknobs he thought would match the cottage's unique character. Soon I found myself exchanging waves and small talk with people on my way to the post office or grocery store. About 6 months after moving in, I made my first real friend in town. I'd been practically living at the small local bookstore, partly for design inspiration, partly for the amazing coffee in their attached cafe. The owner, Patrick Lewis, was about my age and had inherited the store from his uncle just a year before me. "You're going to wear that design book out," he quipped one day as I bought yet another coffee, browsing the same interior design volume. "Why not just buy it already?" "Budget constraints," I admitted with a smile. "I'm renovating bit by bit." The next day I walked in, and the book was wrapped in brown paper behind the counter with a note, "Renovation consultant fee. Your coffee wisdom has improved our menu. Patrick." We became fast friends, bonded, over books and coffee, sharing recommendations, and eventually meals. Patrick was so easy to talk to, completely free of the judgment I'd grown so accustomed to from my family. When I finally told him the full, raw story of how I'd ended up in town, he listened without interruption. "Your parents sound like real pieces of work," was his only comment when I finished. "Their loss." As my design skills sharpened and my client list steadily grew, I decided to take a huge risk. Using my savings, I launched my own small design studio, Elevation Designs, focusing on branding for small businesses. My time with Michael had shown me that so many local businesses struggled with their visual identity but just couldn't afford those big agency fees. I started with a simple website and business cards, then began approaching local shops and restaurants. My very first client was Patrick, who needed a new logo and signage for the bookstore. From there, word of mouth spread like wildfire. Within a year, I had enough regular clients to leave my position with Michael, though we maintained a great collaborative relationship, often referring clients to each other. As my business flourished, so did my investment in the cottage. I replaced the aging roof, updated the ancient heating system, and renovated the kitchen with modern appliances, all while carefully preserving the charming cabinets Grandma Margaret had loved. The property value increased substantially with each improvement, but for me, that was secondary to creating a home that honored her while reflecting my own growing style. The garden, too, flourished under my increasingly knowledgeable care. I added a small patio where I could work outdoors on pleasant days, and a fire pit for evening relaxation. Patrick often joined me there, bringing books he thought I'd enjoy, listening patiently to my ideas for new projects. By the 5-year anniversary of Grandma Margaret's passing, my life had utterly transformed. Elevation Designs had 3 employees besides myself, operating from a converted garage on my property. I had firmly established myself in the community, joining the Small Business Association, even helping organize the annual arts festival. My relationship with Patrick had deepened into something truly special, more than friendship, though we were taking things slowly, both fiercely valuing our independence. My circle of friends now included Eleanor and Michael, who visited regularly, and a growing network of local connections. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Brian since the funeral. Occasionally, I'd receive a generic Christmas card with no personal message, just their printed names. I'd send similar impersonal cards in return, unwilling to completely sever the last thread, but fiercely protecting myself from further hurt. The cottage, once my grandmother's haven, had become my own sanctuary, a testament to my success story. The girl who had once slept in her car now owned a debt-free home, ran a profitable business, and had created a life filled with meaningful connections. I had done exactly what Grandma Margaret believed I could do. Built my own shelter, both physically and emotionally. What I didn't realize was that this hard-won peace was about to be utterly shattered by the very people who had once turned me away. The first flicker of danger came as an email from Brian. An ordinary Tuesday morning, his name in my inbox after 5 years of dead silence made my coffee taste suddenly bitterly wrong. The subject line? Touching base, dear Sabrina. The message itself was dripping with artificial warmth. It's been too long since we've been in touch. I recently came across your design company website and was impressed by what you've accomplished. Mom and Dad mentioned they haven't heard from you in years and are concerned. I hope all is well. Let's catch up soon, Brian. I just stared at the screen, reading and rereading that brief, carefully worded message. No acknowledgement of his silence when I was desperate for help. No mention of their cruel rejection when I was homeless. Just a casual touching base, as if we'd simply lost track of each other through mutual innocent neglect. I showed the email to Patrick during our lunch date. Sounds like someone wants something, he commented, handing my phone back. People don't usually reach out after 5 years of silence just to say hello. I nodded, the same cold suspicion forming in my gut. The timing's strange, too. Why now? Are you going to respond? He asked. Not yet, I decided. I want to see if there's more to this sudden interest. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, my phone rang. My parents' number. After 5 years of silence, the sight of it was so startling, so jarring, that I answered without even thinking. Sabrina, darling. My mother's voice, artificially bright, chirped. It's so good to finally hear your voice. Mom, I replied, keeping my tone deliberately neutral. This is unexpected. Well, we've been thinking about you so much lately. Brian mentioned he reached out and hadn't heard back. We were worried. I've been busy, I said. Running my business takes a lot of time. Yes, we saw your website. Very impressive, honey. Your father and I were just saying how proud we are of what you've accomplished. The praise felt utterly hollow after years of crushing criticism and abandonment. My mother plunged on before I could respond. Anyway, we feel terrible about the misunderstandings in the past. Family is so important and we would just love to reconnect. Perhaps we could come visit you soon? Misunderstandings, I repeated, unable to keep the sharp edge from my voice. Is that what you called turning away your daughter when she was homeless? There was a telling pause before my mother spoke again, her voice lower, more practiced. We all made mistakes, Sabrina. We were going through a difficult time ourselves, but that's in the past. We should focus on rebuilding our relationship now. Something in her tone felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced this exact conversation. I agreed to think about a visit, without committing to any dates, and ended the call as quickly as humanly possible. That evening, another call. This time, Brian. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hey, sis, he said with forced cheer. Mom said you two spoke. It's great that we're all reconnecting. What's going on, Brian? I asked directly. Why the sudden family reunion interest after 5 years? He laughed, a slightly strained, hollow sound. Can't a brother just want to reconnect with his sister? But since you asked, things have been challenging lately. Over the next 20 minutes, Brian unspooled the whole family situation. He'd made several spectacularly poor investment decisions, losing most of his savings and piling up significant debt. Our father had been forced into early retirement from the bank after an internal investigation uncovered some serious irregularities in his management practices. He avoided criminal charges, thankfully, but his reputation was absolutely shredded. And our mother had developed severe back problems, preventing her from working full shifts at the hospital. We've had to downsize. Significantly, Brian explained. The condo was foreclosed and Mom and Dad had to sell the house. They're in a tiny apartment now. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, genuinely meaning it, despite everything. That must be difficult. Yeah, well, family has to stick together in tough times, right? The sheer irony of his statement seemed utterly lost on him. Anyway, we were thinking we could come visit next weekend. Get to know your town, see Grandma's old place, reconnect. I reluctantly agreed to a Saturday lunch, setting very clear boundaries. It would be a brief visit, absolutely no overnight stay. After hanging up, I immediately called Patrick. "They're coming Saturday," I told him. And from what Brian said, they're in deep financial trouble. "Want me to be there?" Patrick offered immediately. I accepted gratefully, already feeling a crushing anxiety about the impending reunion. That Saturday, my family arrived. Their presence, now diminished by their new circumstances, was palpable. My mother embraced me with teary eyes, a performance I recognized. Brian, meanwhile, hung back, his gaze sweeping over the cottage with thinly veiled, almost predatory interest. "You've done wonders with the place," my mother gushed as I gave them a brief, uncomfortable tour. "It's so much nicer than when your grandmother lived here." "Grandmother kept it perfectly nice," I corrected her, my voice sharper than I intended. "I've just updated some things while maintaining her style." "Must have cost a fortune," my father remarked, peering at the new kitchen appliances, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Seems like your little design business is doing well." "Elevation Designs is doing very well," Patrick interjected smoothly, stepping closer, a quiet guardian. "Sabrina has clients across 3 states now." My father's eyes, already narrowed, turned to slits at Patrick's presence. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to have backup. "And you are Patrick Lewis?" "I own the bookstore in town," Patrick replied, his tone even and confident. "And I've known Sabrina since she moved here." Lunch was a tense, agonizing affair. My parents and Brian alternated between backhanded compliments about the house and transparently highlighting their current financial woes. My mother mentioned their cramped apartment 3 times. Brian droned on about the impossible job market, despite his qualifications. As they were getting ready to leave, Brian asked to use the bathroom. He was gone for an unusually long time. When he finally returned, his phone was conspicuously in his hand. "Getting good reception here?" he commented casually, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "The cottage has really solid bones. Good investment property." After they finally left, Patrick helped me clean up. "Well, that was uncomfortable," he sighed, loading the dishwasher. "Did you notice your brother taking pictures of every room?" I nodded, a cold, sick feeling twisting in my stomach. My father asking about property values, my mother commenting on how much space there was for just one person. "They're planning something, Sabrina," Patrick said, stating what we both instinctively knew. "Be careful." The following week brought daily calls from my family. My mother wanted recipes. My father had questions about the heating system. Brian, most tellingly, wondered if I had Grandma Margaret's original deed. Each conversation felt like a probe, testing for vulnerabilities, looking for an opening. The truth became brutally clear during their second visit, 2 weeks later. We were sitting in the garden when my father, without preamble, broached the subject directly. "Sabrina, your mother and I have been thinking. This house has 3 bedrooms and you're just one person. We're really struggling in that tiny apartment. It would make sense for us to move in here. A family home should house a family." I just stared at him, momentarily speechless. "This is my home," I finally managed to say, the words feeling heavy. "I inherited it from grandmother." "Yes, but surely she intended it to benefit the whole family?" My mother interjected, her voice dripping with false concern. "She wouldn't have wanted us struggling while you have all this space." "Actually," I shot back, anger igniting inside me, "she specifically left it to me because she knew I would care for it properly, and because she knew I was the only one who truly appreciated it." "Well, regardless of her intentions," my father said, dismissively waving a hand, "we are family. We should support each other." He then laid out his audacious plan. "Brian could take the room above the garage and your mother and I would take the master bedroom." "That's my office," I said incredulously, my voice rising, "where I run my business." "You could move your little computer to the dining room," my mother suggested, as if solving a trivial problem. "It would be a much more efficient use of the space." "This is not happening," I stated firmly, my voice now shaking with pure rage. "I am sorry for your situation, but you cannot move in here." The conversation deteriorated rapidly from there, my father becoming increasingly insistent, my mother alternating between blatant guilt trips and thinly veiled passive-aggressive comments. Brian remained suspiciously quiet, typing away on his phone throughout the argument. After they finally left, I immediately called my lawyer, the same one who had handled Grandma Margaret's will. I explained the whole insane situation, asking him to review all documentation related to my ownership. "Everything is in order, Sabrina," he assured me. "The house is solely in your name. They have no legal claim to it whatsoever." Despite this reassurance, I followed Patrick's suggestion and installed security cameras covering every entrance to the house and property. Something, a dark premonition, told me this confrontation was far from over. Just 3 weeks after that deeply uncomfortable visit, I had to fly to Boston for an important design conference. Patrick, bless him, offered to check on the house, but he had the bookstore to run and could only drive by occasionally. On the second evening, as I was networking at a reception, my phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Jenkins, my next-door neighbor. "Thought you were away until tomorrow. Saw lights on in your house and people moving around inside. Everything okay?" My heart immediately raced. I called her back, my voice tight. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm still in Boston. There absolutely shouldn't be anyone in my house." "Oh dear," she replied, concern heavy in her voice. "Should I call the police?" "No, let me check my security cameras first," I said, trying desperately to stay calm. "I'll call you right back." I opened the security app on my phone, my fingers trembling. The footage showed my father's car in the driveway, and 3 figures unloading boxes and suitcases. My jaw dropped. I watched in utter disbelief as my father used some tool to force the back door lock, then let my mother and Brian inside. They were breaking in. They were moving in. I immediately called Patrick, who was just closing the bookstore. "They're breaking into my house," I choked out, my voice shaking with fury and shock. "They're moving in while I'm gone." "I'll drive over right now," he promised. "Should I call the police?" "Not yet," I said, still reeling from the betrayal. "Let me try calling them first." I called my father's cell phone, watching on the camera as he checked the screen, then deliberately declined the call. I tried my mother and Brian, same result. Finally, I called the landline I'd installed in the cottage. After several rings, Brian answered, his voice irritatingly casual. "Hello, Wilson residence?" "Brian, what the hell are you doing in my house?" I demanded, my anger boiling over. There was a pause, then a sigh, almost an exasperated sound. "Sabrina, we were going to call you tomorrow. We're just getting settled in." "Getting settled in?" I shrieked. "You broke into my house. You are trespassing." "Don't be dramatic," he replied, his tone chillingly cool. "This is a family home. We are family. Besides, it's not like you need all this space just for yourself." I could hear my father in the background, and Brian partially covered the phone. I still made out my father saying, "Tell her we'll discuss it when she returns. The decision has been made." "You need to leave right now," I stated, struggling to keep my voice from trembling with rage. "I am calling the police if you are not out of my house in 30 minutes. Brian's voice hardened. "That would be a mistake, Sabrina. We have nowhere else to go, and calling the police on your own family would be cruel." Then came the gut punch. "Besides, Mom and Dad are the ones with the real family connection to this house, not you. It's their legacy." "It's my house, Brian. Grandmother left it to me." "A technicality," he dismissed. "Anyway, we've already spoken to a lawyer about challenging the will. Grandma was old and not entirely competent when she made those arrangements. We have a good case for overturning it." The threat sent a bone-chilling dread through me. While I knew intellectually they had no legal ground, the idea of a court battle felt utterly daunting. I ended the call and immediately booked the first flight home for the next morning, missing the final day of the conference. Patrick met me at the airport, his face grim. "They're still there," he reported. "I went by this morning. Your father answered the door and told me it was a family matter and to mind my own business." "Did you call the police?" I asked as we drove toward the cottage, my knuckles white on the dashboard. "I thought that should be your decision," he replied. "But I did speak to your lawyer. He said their claims about challenging the will are absolute nonsense." Your grandmother had regular cognitive assessments as part of her medical care and was fully competent when she updated her will. When we finally arrived at the cottage, I was absolutely shocked to see they'd already made visible changes. My mother's decorative pillows adorned the porch swing. My father's golf club stood by the front door. They had quite literally moved in, assuming ownership in my absence. I took a deep, shaky breath and entered my own home, my key feeling foreign in my hand. The scene inside was worse than I had ever imagined. My carefully arranged living room had been completely rearranged. Boxes of my parents' belongings were stacked haphazardly in corners. Family photos I had removed years ago were now prominently displayed on the mantel, replacing my own cherished pictures. My mother emerged from the kitchen genuinely startled to see me. "Sabrina, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "Clearly," I replied, my voice dangerously cold. "Where's Dad?" "In the master bedroom, organizing his clothes." The casual way she referred to my bedroom sent a jolt of pure fury coursing through me. I found my father hanging his suits in my closet, my own clothes shoved unceremoniously to one side. Brian was in the room above the garage, my office, where he'd pushed my design equipment into one corner to make space for his bed. I gathered them all in the living room, Patrick standing like a rock, supportively behind me. "You all need to leave," I stated firmly, my voice now steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Now." "Sabrina, be reasonable," my father began, his usual authoritative tone back. "This arrangement makes sense for everyone. You have this big house all to yourself while we've been struggling." "A situation of your own making," I pointed out, my voice rising, "and completely irrelevant to my home ownership." "You don't even have a real family," my mother said, with surprising, cutting venom. "No husband, no children, just you and your little business. We need this house more than you do." "That is not how property ownership works," Patrick interjected, his voice firm. My father spun around, glaring at him. "This does not concern you. This is between family." "Patrick is more family to me than any of you have ever been," I shot back. "He didn't abandon me when I was homeless and desperate." "Ancient history," Brian waved dismissively. "We're here now, ready to be a family again." "After you've depleted your resources and need something from me," I said, staring each of them down. "This isn't about family. This is about you wanting my house." "We will take this house," my father stated flatly, dropping all pretense, his eyes cold and hard. "One way or another, we've already spoken to a lawyer about our options." "Your non-existent options," I corrected him. "The house is legally mine." "For now," he said with disturbing confidence. "But we have documented evidence of your grandmother's declining mental state. And as her direct descendants, we have a strong case for rightful inheritance." I knew deep down he was bluffing, but the sheer audacity, the cold calculation, it broke something inside me. This confrontation had gone far enough. Without another word, I pulled out my phone, and I dialed 911. "What are you doing?" my mother demanded, her eyes wide with panic. "Calling the police to report trespassers in my home," I replied, my voice chillingly calm. "We are not trespassers. We are your family," she shrieked. "Family does not break into each other's homes," I said, as the dispatcher answered. I reported the situation, providing my address, explaining that people had entered my home without permission and were refusing to leave. My father lunged for the phone, but Patrick, quick as a flash, stepped between us. "Don't make this worse," he warned my father. The 15 minutes it took for the police to arrive were thick with tense, suffocating silence. When 2 police officers finally knocked on my door, I answered, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still thrumming through. "Me." I showed them my ID, the deed to the property. "These people," I explained, gesturing toward my family, "entered my home without permission while I was out of town. They damaged my back door and refused to leave." My father, of course, tried to argue it was just a family disagreement, not a police matter, but the officers weren't having it. "Sir, if you do not have legal residence here and the homeowner wants you to leave, you need to leave," the older officer stated firmly. Otherwise, you will be arrested for trespassing. This is ridiculous. She's my daughter, my father protested, aghast. That does not give you the right to enter her property without permission, the officer replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. You have 30 minutes to collect your immediate belongings. Anything else can be arranged for pickup at a later date. As they gathered their things under the watchful eyes of the police, my mother approached me, tears streaming down her face. How could you do this to your own parents? She sobbed. I met her gaze unflinching, the same way you could turn away your daughter when she had nowhere else to go. The security footage of their break-in was provided to the police, who advised me on obtaining a restraining order. My lawyer filed the paperwork the very next day, and within a week, a temporary order was granted, legally preventing my family from approaching my property. Watching the police escort my family from my home, I felt this incredibly complex mixture of emotions. There was a deep, raw pain at the sheer depth of their betrayal, a burning anger at their entitlement, but overwhelmingly, there was a profound sense of righteous validation. For the first time in my life, I had truly stood my ground against their manipulation and emotional abuse. That night, after securing the house with new, unbreachable locks, I sat with Patrick on the porch swing my grandmother had loved. You did the right thing, he assured me, his arm a comforting weight around my shoulders. I know, I replied, watching the first stars emerge in the evening sky. It shouldn't have had to come to this. The legal aftermath of my family's attempted takeover dragged on for several months. The temporary restraining order eventually became permanent when irrefutable evidence of their premeditated plan emerged. Text messages recovered from Brian's phone chillingly revealed their scheme: to move in during my absence, then claim emotional duress if I tried to evict them. Their bluff about challenging the will was exposed as completely baseless when my lawyer presented Grandma Margaret's medical records, confirming her absolutely sound mental state. My father and Brian faced minor criminal charges, probation, and community service. Throughout the proceedings, they stubbornly maintained they had done nothing wrong, clinging to this twisted belief that family property should be shared. Mother, however, slowly began to show signs of regret, as the harsh consequences of their actions became painfully clear. 3 weeks after the court hearing, I received a handwritten letter from her. Unlike the defensive, entitled tone they had all taken previously, her words seemed genuinely, heartbreakingly remorseful. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote, but I need you to know that I see now how terribly we failed you. Not just in these recent events, but throughout your life. Your father and Brian are still angry, but I cannot continue pretending what we did was justified. When you needed us most, we turned you away. There is no excuse for that. The letter stirred a complicated swirl of feelings within me. Part of me yearned to believe in her remorse, while another part remained deeply wary of further manipulation. After careful consideration, I wrote back a brief civil response, acknowledging her apology without offering immediate reconciliation. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, could not be quickly rebuilt. The entire experience left emotional scars that absolutely required professional help. I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma, and I joined a support group for people with toxic family relationships. The shared stories, the understanding from others who had experienced similar betrayals, helped me grasp that my situation was far from unique, and that setting boundaries wasn't just acceptable, it was crucial for healing. Family isn't defined by blood, my therapist often reminded me. It's defined by consistent love, respect, and support. This truth resonated so deeply as I reflected on who had actually provided those things in my life. Patrick, whose steadfast presence had become the cornerstone of my happiness. Eleanor, who had extended a literal lifeline when I was at my lowest point. The incredible community of neighbors and fellow small business owners who had welcomed me without judgment. My relationship with Patrick only deepened through these challenging months. His unwavering support during the family crisis had shown me what genuine partnership truly looked like. On the first anniversary of that horrific break-in incident, he proposed, in Grandma Margaret's garden. It was now flourishing with the perennials I had planted in her memory. You deserve a family who sees your worth, he said, as he offered a simple, elegant ring. I would be honored to start that family with you. 6 months later, we married in a small, intimate ceremony in that very same garden. Eleanor was my maid of honor, and Michael stood proudly with Patrick. My parents and Brian were not invited. A boundary that fiercely protected the joy and peace of the day. Instead, I was surrounded by the family I had chosen. People who had proved their love through actions rather than mere biological connection. As life settled into this wonderful new normal, I found myself contemplating ways to transform my painful experiences into something truly meaningful. The cottage, once a source of such bitter conflict, became a sanctuary, not just for me, but for others in need. I established a small foundation in Grandma Margaret's name, providing temporary housing and career mentorship for young adults facing homelessness due to family rejection. Everyone deserves a safe place to land, I explained to the local paper when they covered the foundation's launch, and everyone deserves the chance to build their own success story. The first recipient was Jaime, a 22-year-old graphic design student whose parents had cut her off when she dared to change majors from business to art. The parallels to my own story were absolutely striking. I offered her the apartment above the garage, now beautifully converted into a proper living space, and an internship at Elevation Designs. Watching her confidence grow, watching her blossom, reminded me so much of my own journey. 5 years. After being abandoned by my biological family, I had created something far, far stronger than the ties that had so miserably failed me. I had built a home, a business, a marriage, and a profound purpose that not only honored Grandma Margaret's unwavering belief in me, but extended that same crucial support to others. I occasionally received updates about my parents and Brian through mutual acquaintances. My father never, ever acknowledged his wrongdoing, stubbornly maintaining that I had been selfish and unforgiving. Brian had moved to another state, attempting to start over after his financial missteps. My mother had separated from my father and was bravely attempting to rebuild her life independently, a development that, at least, suggested she had learned something from our family's implosion. The door to reconciliation with them remained theoretically open, but with very clear, non-negotiable conditions that honored my self-worth. Any relationship would need to be built on genuine respect, not convenience or need. Until then, I focused on nurturing the healthy connections that had proved their immense value. On quiet evenings, sitting in Grandma Margaret's garden with Patrick, I often reflected on the incredible journey that had brought me here. From homelessness to homeowner, from abandoned daughter to community supporter, I had discovered that family was not a birthright, but a precious privilege earned through consistent love and respect. I learned that having no family is infinitely better than having one that hurts you, and that creating your own family of choice is not just possible, but often far more fulfilling than maintaining toxic blood ties. The cottage that my grandmother left me had become more than just a house. It was physical proof that I deserved to take up space in the world, that my dreams and my boundaries mattered. By fiercely defending it against those who would take it from me, I had finally, definitively defended my own worth. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who tried to take advantage of you? Or have you built a chosen family that supported you when your biological one failed? Tell me your story in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and take care.